Oh, wow. Hey, what's up? Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that always. Today, we just want to go ahead and continue this series I got here, Unsung Heroes of America. And we're going to be talking about a great warrior chieftain. His name is Lempira. He was born in Honduras. He was a Lenca Maya Indian in the time of conquest, dealing with these conquistadors and fighting for freedom. So he and his people wouldn't be enslaved, put into servitude, their lands taken, their culture extinguished, and their forced assimilation to the European ways. What we're looking at right now is a map of Central America. All right, we are talking about this region of Honduras. It's called the Lempira Department today. It says Lempira is one of the 18 departments in Honduras. Located in the western part of the country, it is bordered by the departments of Ocotepeque and Copan to the west, Intibuca to the east, and Santa Barbara to the north. Okay, that's where it's located. To its south lies El Salvador, which is Honduras' border. The departmental capital is Gracias. It was named Gracias Department until 1943. In colonial times, Gracias was an early important administrative center for the Spaniards. It eventually lost importance to Antigua in Guatemala. That became the capital of Central America, Antigua, Guatemala. Lempira is a rugged department, and it is relatively isolated from the rest of the country. The highest mountain peak in Honduras, Cerro de las Minas, is in Lempira. The department was named after Lempira, a local chieftain of the Lenca people who fought against the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. Opals are mined near the town of Erandique. Okay, so as you guys can see, so when we zoom in, as you guys, just to get a reference, you got Mexico right under Mexico, you got Belize, Guatemala, and then you got Honduras, Salvador, Honduras. The western part of Honduras is what we're talking about right here. As they were saying, Gracias, as you guys see, Cerro de las Minas, the highest place there. This whole region, we're going to look at in another map. It's over here where it says Lempira. You guys see that? Where the word Salvador is, you guys will see Lempira right over it. This region right here, this state, is where most of what we're going to talk about today took place, right? And where this cacique and his people were, in general, dwelling, hiding, and just, existing during the conquest. Before I begin, just want to remind everybody we have a whole series called Unsung Heroes of America, where we did episodes on Galvarino. Learn about him. That's part one. Part two is about Cacique Huatue, or Chief Hatue, was burned alive in the name of Jesus from Haiti and Cuba. Make sure to catch those videos. And then part three, we're talking about real Black Panthers. We're talking about Jaguar warriors, the forgotten, the real story of the origin of T'Challa. We can't forget our heroes. All right. So part four today, what we're going to be reading about, we're going to be learning about, again, Lempira, the cacique, chieftain warrior of Honduras. So just off the bat, Lempira is very big in Honduras, right? He's a national hero. There's a Lempira Day, which is July 20th. It says Lempira Day is on July 20th. It is an annual Honduran festival named after a Lenca indigenous leader who led the struggle against the Spanish conquistadors in the 1530s. Chief Lempira gathered a 30,000 person army to fight the Spanish conquerors, but it proved unsuccessful, they're saying here. So, we're going to read the whole story. We're going to get it from the primary source. I translated that and from the Spanish primary source, and we're going to go ahead and get that today. History of Lempira Day, it says Lempira was a warrior king of Lenca, Western Honduras, Central America. In the 1530s, he led the resistance against Francisco de Montejo's attempt to conquer and incorporate the region into the Honduran province. On the orders of their governor, Francisco de Montejo, the Spaniards assaulted Lempira at the Peol de Cirque, which is the present-day Lempira department. Then it says Herrera reports that Lempira retreated to a mountain and fought the Spaniards for months. So that's what we're gonna get. We're gonna get Antonio Herrera's account from the 1500s. I translated it. All right. It says in the 1980s, Honduran historian Mario Felipe Martinez Castillo found a different version of Lempira in a document called Méritos y Servicios, Rodrigo Ruiz, Nueva España, which was published in Mexico City in 1558. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and also get this other version because what happened is there's a little controversy because they're saying, as it says here, finally the Spaniards coaxed him out. This is an Antonio Herrera's account. They supposedly said, hey, let's talk peace, and they fooled him and killed him. You know, they ambushed him. That's supposed to be the official story, the national story of the country and everything. But again, in the 1980s, they found another document which tells a little different story that he actually fought. He was in battle when he died. He didn't just get ambushed. So we're going to read both accounts today. All right, again, this is a big story in Honduras. This is something we all should know as Americans who these people are. He was fighting against slavery. He didn't want his people to be enslaved. Okay? Lempira was an important leader of the indigenous resistance against Spanish domination. His area of operation was a vast and rough territory in the southern half of what is now the Lempira department of Honduras. The chronicler Antonio Herrera describes Lempira, whose name means Lord of the Mountains, as of medium height, thick back, and thick limbs, brave, courageous, and intelligent. All right, we're going to get all that account. All right, so we're going to get his story from Antonio. All right, and then down here says, again, that the Honduran historian Mario Felipe Martinez has cast doubts on Antonio Herrera's version of Lempira's death after discovering in the General Archive of the Indies a certificate presented in 1558 before the Spanish authorities in Mexico by the soldier Rodrigo Ruiz. All right, we're going to get, again, his version as well. We're going to read both versions of Lempira's story, the two major ones that exist in history about him. Literally, that's all you get. Again, Lempira, Lenca ruler, Dashta hijack with all the drawings they got of him in the internet. I just want to show you guys something. This is how they draw him. You know, this is in the 1500s. There's no descriptions of what he looked like physically. His complexion described his body, but not what he looked like or his hair type. It didn't say how light or dark he was. So any of this stuff to me is like whitewashing. This is just modern day drawings. And also what I find interesting is that sometimes in their celebration on Lempira Day, some of the local people paint themselves in black. Do you guys see this? Paint themselves in black. I can't make this up. You see? It's funny because they got the whitewashed version, right? And a banner right here, but then they painted themselves like this, right? You see that? I just wanted to show that. But not only like that, they do it normally too, but just know that Honduras has a lot of so-called melanated people, guys, and that they celebrate it as well too. Not just people painting themselves so-called black, all right? So again, you got the Wikipedia page and you get the very, simple story of Antonio Herrera, as it says here, historical accounts of Lempira de Fur. You got Antonio Herrera in Tordesillas, published in the Historia General de los Hechos. We're going to read that. And then they cite again the other source from the 1980s, the Honduran historian Mario Felipe Martinez Castillo, discovered a very different account of Lempira in the document titled Méritos y Servicios Rodriguez. So basically what it is a story, it's a court case. Literally, Méritos y Servicios means proof of merits, all right? Proof of merits. And basically what he did is he appealed to the people in charge in Spain that, because he was the one that killed Lempira, he should get a pension because he was living poor. He wasn't paid. He wasn't compensated. He's not recognized. So he brought that case up with the people in charge, the royal crown, in Spain, the Catholics, right? So we're going to read that again, that translated. These are the two things they're citing here. Just wanted you guys to see the basic history, all right? And again, they always source the same source here, some sources in Spanish, all right? So again, we're going right to the primary source, Historia General de las Indias Occidentales o de los Hechos de los castellanos en las islas y tierra firme del mar oceano, escrita por Antonio de Herrera. Okay, this is volume 3. And English translation of that is the general history of the West Indies or of the actions of the Castilians in the islands and mainland of the Ocean Sea by Antonio de Herrera. Again, he wrote this back, when he was there in the 1500s, books, versions of it, 1600s that come out. And then this is a 1728 version of Antonio's accounts. All right, still a very pretty old version. And we'll go to page 278 of this book, and we go to chapter 19 of this book, o capítulo 19, and the title is De lo que el adelanto Don Francisco de Montejo hizo, in which the governor Don Francisco de Montejo did in taking possession of the governor of Honduras and the war in Cerquin. And Cerquin is where they actually had the war with Lempira. We're going to read. All right, so I just want you guys to see, in case you doubt what I'm saying, you can take a screenshot of this. We're going to read parts of that. We're going to translate all this page right here. So if you want to go ahead and take a screenshot, read it yourself, so you can see that I pretty much translated it word for word. I did use Google Translate, but it was actually pretty good. So we're going to translate up to this paragraph right here. All right. This paragraph is where we're going to end it on page 280. And I got the translation for you ready. All right. Again, the source is the general history of the West Indies or the actions of the Castilians in the islands and mainland of the Ocean Sea from the 1500s. And when they're saying el adelantado, that means like advanced or the governor. He's been advanced. He's the governor, Montejo. Okay, so we're going to read. Again, this is a translation starting from this, el adelantado Montejo, en viéndose pacífico gobernador de Honduras, and seeing himself the Pacific governor of Honduras, right? So it says here, the adelantado Montejo, seeing himself a peaceful governor of Honduras, took away the allotments from those who had them under Don Pedro de Alvarado, as was said, and expelled from the land all the Indians who voluntarily left Guatemala, and tried to pacify the towns that were still not safe, and which he used much diligence and industry, as a person of prudence, and when he thought that the whole land was at peace, of which he showed much glory, as he had written to the viceroy Don Antonio de Mendoza, a brave Indian rose up in a province called Cerquin, in the terms of the city or in the ends of the city of Gracias a Dios, located between mountains, difficult to conquer. This Indian called Lempira, which means Lord of the Mountains, summoned all the lords of the region, with whom he and the natives gathered 30,000 men. Listen, he gathered what? 30,000 men. This is not just an ordinary person. People love and trust him and will die for him. You guys see 30,000 men and persuaded them to want freedom. Yes, he's telling them, hey, you guys got to fight for your freedom. It being a shameful thing that so many brave men in their own land should find themselves in the miserable servitude of so few foreigners. This is what he was telling his people. How can we be in the servitude? How can we become slaves in our own land, which by just a few foreigners? He offered to be their captain and to put himself at the greatest risk. He assured them that if they were united, victory would be certain for them, and promised them to follow him, some willingly, and they killed a few Castilians. Castilians is the Spaniards, right? They're coming from Castile, Spain. They killed a few Castilians whom they found unguarded in the land. And don't assume black, white, in either way, these could all be melanated people, right? you know. So it says the adelantado or the governor Montejo, having learned of the uprising, sent Captain Caceres from Gracias a Dios with some Castilian soldiers so that he would put Lempira in obedience, who had already ordered the fortification of a very famous rock, which they called Cerquin. And from there, they defended themselves to the detriment of the Castilians. So, what did they do? The Indians, with the leadership of Lempira, they had built a fort, a fortification, or was it already there? Very famous rock, huh? Which they called Cerquin. That's what they called this fort. And the Castilians were like, man, who's suffering great hardships, right? These Spaniards in the siege, which lasted 6 months, having wintered in the campaign, could be that they did not end with the death of Lempira, which happened in this manner. So this is according to Antonio, right? This is what we're translating right here, guys. I'm telling you, this is what we're translating. So it says, there were many chieftains who followed him in this war, some against their will, so that they would not be considered cowards, others because of the respect they had for Lempira. And there were others who told him to abandon that war and to take the Castilians as friends, since in the end he would lose. But he was so courageous that he never showed weakness, nor would he listen to the means of peace that the Castilians offered him. Rather, he held them in such low regard that from his fort he hurled many insults at them, seeing his great boldness, and that no way could be found to take advantage of him. Captain Caceres ordered that a soldier be placed on horseback, so close that an arquebus could reach him, and that this one should speak to him, admonishing him to accept the friendship that was offered to him, and that another soldier standing on his haunches with the arquebus should shoot at him. And he ordered in this manner. The soldier continued his conversation and gave his advice and persuasions, and the chief responded that war should not tire the soldiers, nor frighten them, and that whoever could do the most would win. And saying other arrogant words, more than those of an Indian, the soldier with the haunches took aim at him when he saw the opportunity and hit him in the forehead. Without the help of his helmet, that he had in his fashion very elegant and plumed, Lempira fell rolling down the mountain, armed with those cotton corselets or skirts, very useful for Indian warfare, which the Castilian used. With this death of Lempira, who the day before had been very sad, a great uproar and confusion arose among the Indians because many fled and threw themselves down those mountains, and others immediately surrendered. Long before the Castilians arrived in those parts of Gracias a Dios, the Indians had news of them, and they did not stop their passions and wars because in particular those of Cerquin considered it impossible that they could get to where they were due to their multitude, and because first they had to go through many lands and defeat many people, and especially the Cares, another group of Indians, right? Cares or Carians, Caribs, Cares, Carians, Cares, and Portones, another group. Although between them there was a cruel war, in which Lempira had such a reputation for bravery that they affirmed that in one battle he killed 120 men with his own hand. So these other Indian groups were afraid of Lempira. They had wars with him and his people. They weren't always cool before the Europeans arrived. They had respect for him because what they're saying is that he killed 120 men with his own hand. And old Indians certified that it was believed for certain that Lempira was bewitched, or as the common people say, enchanted, because in infinite battles in which he was found, he was never wounded, nor could they shoot him. He was of medium height, broad-shouldered, and of thick limbs, brave and courageous of good reason. He never had more than 2 wives, and he died between 38 and 40 years. And the Indians were of the opinion that if Lempira were not to die, Cerquin would not be won so quickly. For this war they pacified themselves and agreed with the Cares, their enemies, together with men from more than 200 towns. 200 towns. Listen, guys, he organized this, right? He was trying to prevent the colonization, the conquest of his people, the enslavement. Remember, this is 1530s. Remember what we read recently, I believe last month, that before 1552, 500,000 Indians were enslaved from Central America and shipped to other parts of the Americas, right? Remember? We read that. So this is what he was trying to prevent. And if he would have, probably one of his people would have been okay. All right, this is what he was trying to prevent. Their congregation was in the Sierra de las Neblinas, in their language, Piraera, where there was a large population whose lord was in Tepica, which when he died was divided into many towns. Here the war was agreed upon, and they named Lempira as general, who often attacked the Castilians, the Mexican Indians, and the Guatemalans who were with them. Where he did much harm and his own people received him, but as there were so many they did not notice him. Alonso de Cáceres sent him an embassy begging him to accept peace and obey the king of Castile. Again, begging him, guys, begging him. Come on, man. Like, you guys don't understand. He had him, they was trying to get him for like 12 years. They couldn't. They're begging him to accept peace and obey the king of Castile, promising to treat him well. His answer was to kill the messengers, because he did not want to know any other lord, nor learn any other law, nor have any other customs than those he had. All right, he's like, he killed the Spanish messengers. You saw that? He's like, I don't care about your gods, your church, your religion, your laws, your customs. All right, he didn't care about it. He didn't want those. He wanted his. And unless a strong decision was made to have him killed, as has been said, he would suffer great hardship. After Lempira was dead, Captain Cáceres sent the remaining lords a present of shirts, sandals, roosters, and Mexican embroidered cloth, and 4 lances, warning them that if they did not obey, they would die like their captain. They, seeing their agreement, sent another present of roosters, saying that they wanted to surrender to the great king of Castile, whom they called the Acapuca, which is as much as saying the great Christian, and that since such brave men served him, he must be a great lord, and with great rejoicing of drums, snails, and other forms of pleasure, they obeyed. All right. So that's the account of his murder and his story right there that Antonio Herrera wrote in the 1500s. Okay. Now, the king of Castile, that could most likely, we're talking about 1530s. I kind of forget how long Charles V reigned, but it's either Charles V, right, or his son Philip, King Philip. And we're talking about black folks, right? We're talking about black on black. Yeah, more on more war. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Again, this was the account of Antonio Herrera, which is a little controversial, especially after they found the other document, the other account from the soldier who supposedly actually killed him. Because in this account that Antonio gave us, it says that he was just lured outside to do peace talks, and then he got killed, or he got ambushed. So it's almost like he died a bad way. He didn't die in battle. And then also, believe it or not, guys, even though this account was out before the 1980s, there was no other account of Lempira, guys. They didn't have no other account because Lempira gave them so much trouble. All these chroniclers, Spanish conquistadors, they tried to avoid his story and name. They just mentioned that there was a war in this area, but they don't mention with who, how much of a rebel or hardship they had with him. Antonio's like the only guy right here that got the closest to actually do a more specific story on him. But before the 1980s, it was the only one. And people actually consider this to be a legend, while the local people of Honduras was like, no, man, he was real, until they found the other document, right, from the 1980s, again, and that which was in the archive. Hold on, I got the translation. So it's in the General Archive of the Indies and Seville, Patronage file number 69, proof of merits from 1558 in Mexico. And the source is testimony of Rodrigo Ruiz, the conqueror, who claims to have killed the cacique Lempira. Again, It's hard to get these references, but as you guys can see in this other website, it has nothing to do with what we're reading. Academy Lab, Lempira. This is in Spanish. They also source the same. Los últimos días de Lempira, or the last days of Lempira, Rodrigo Ruiz, el conquistador español, who beat the combatant, right? And then you got merits and services of Rodrigo Ruiz, Nueva España, archive of the original. All right, so that's where we're gonna read. I also was able to find a good Spanish copy, not the original, but this guy is the guy, Mario Felipe Martinez from the 1980s, who found it and made it public. All right, and this is where I was able to find a good version of it right here from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Honduras, or the Autonomy National Library of Honduras. Okay, this is real history right here. This is a real article they have here. This is what we're going to translate right now. Okay, and we're going to read it real quick here. For the dismount, we're going to get both versions of it today. Finally, the story of Lempira is told. He will not be forgotten. Okay, it says here, Alvaro Ruiz on behalf of Rodrigo Ruiz in the case being handled by Dr. Céspedes de Cardenas, prosecutor. I say that my client presented in the said case the original evidence that he made the services that as conqueror of the province of Oaxaca and many other provinces he has rendered to your highness, which he needs to approach your royal person to present a petition in the following terms. Again, proof of merits from 1558. All right, it's like, hey, my client, that's his lawyer over here. It must be related because they got the same last name, right? He's like, hey, come on, man. Listen to what I got to say about what he did for you guys. It says, in the great city of Tenochtitlan, Mexico, on the 8th day of the month of February of 1558, while the presidents and judges of the royal court of the New Spain, Mexico, were in public hearing, Rodrigo Ruiz, a resident of this city, appeared before me, Antonio Turcios, chief secretary of the royal court and government of New Spain, and presented a petition, and together with it an interrogation, along with which he requested that the witnesses that would be presented to support said petition and interrogation be questioned as he requests below. Most powerful gentleman, Rodrigo Ruiz, resident of this city, I say that I have been in this part of the Indies for 28 years, during which time I was engaged in the service of your highness in the conquests and wars that arose in the conquest of the provinces of Guatemala, Higueras, and Honduras. And I am the conqueror of them, and also of the natives, indigenous of the terms of the city of Gracias a Dios, of those of the town of Comayagua, and those of the town of San Jorge, of the province of the valley of Olancho, where through my person I perform many and very outstanding services to your highness, with my person, weapons, and horse. And it was no small part, so that those provinces came to the knowledge of God our Lord, and in obedience of your highness, of which it is convenient for me to give notice of everything to your royal person and council of the Indies, so that with knowledge of said information, and if what I say is true, it may be served to order that I be given food in this New Spain in the way that best serves to sustain my person and the last days of Lempira. Mario Felipe Martinez prepared. Oh, sorry, I added this. So that's actually the title, which was on. Let me just show you guys. Sorry about that. So every time there's a new page, there's a title. The title's always, and I copy paste that right here. See this? I wasn't supposed to. So that's why it sounds weird. So we're going to, it says, it's true, sir, in order that I be given food in this New Spain in the way that best serves to sustain my person and house, arms, and horse as I have always had. Therefore, I ask and beg your highness to order that the said information be received with the questions of this interrogation that I present, and that the witness respond before your president and judges as they should rightly do. The witnesses that through my Rodrigo Ruiz will be presented for proof. I ask that they be questioned about the many services that I have provided to your majesty in this part of the Indies, and the conquests and pacifications of the natives to present before your royal person, or before the lords of your royal council of the Indies, or before whomever is rightly owed or rightfully owed, so that attentive to them, your majesty may be pleased to do favors by ordering that in this said city I be given whatever is necessary to help support my person and house, wife, children, arms, and horse, as I have always had and have, and with all this I have served your majesty wherever he has presented himself. I ask that you be questioned with the questions I present, and that what you say be made known to me in a public manner for the purpose I have requested. I ask that you be asked if you know me, the said Rodrigo Ruiz, and for how long ago, and if you know that having conquered and pacified the natives of the province of Guatemala, and having given peace and obedience to his majesty as was required, I, the said Rodrigo Ruiz, as a zealous servant of his majesty, left the said province with my weapons and horse and went to help conquer and pacify the natives of the province of Gracias a Dios, right? So that's where he eventually met up with Lempira, right? Gracias or Lempira, who were also in revolt and rebelled against the service of his majesty, made up a large forces, army of warriors, right? So they called Rodrigo to go help out because they couldn't stop Lempira, and who had hidden or protected themselves in rocks, in a fort, right? In rocks, they're saying elevation of terrain formed by rocks, for having killed many Spaniards as they had done. Tell us what you know about this case. Likewise, ask the witnesses if they know that when I arrived at the place called Ciguatepeque, where Captain General Francisco de Montejo was exercising his duties, right? That's the Governor Montejo we just read about in Antonio Herrera's account, conquering the said provinces in the name of his majesty, the said Rodrigo Ruiz sent me and other Spaniards to call for peace from the rebellious Indians who were on the rocks. So we went to the place and arrived telling them to come in peace and to obey his majesty, as they were obliged to do. The said forces came out in the amount of about 2,000 men. 2,000 men, listen, with armed hands, and gave us a battle in which they killed Francisco de Mesa. So you see, when they were saying they sent somebody to talk about peace, that really did happen. But look what happened. He didn't just come out and get shot, like Antonio Herrera was saying. He came out with 2,000 men and they went into battle. And they actually killed some Spaniards. They killed Francisco de Mesa and Gasparin, and many of us came out wounded in the battle. Let the witnesses tell what they know about this case and what they saw. Also ask the witnesses if they know that by order of the said governor and captain general, he ordered us to wage war on them everywhere, which we waged for a long time, both night and day, and we pursued them throughout the territory, always with great difficulty, and with hunger and other necessities of war, and they never ever wanted to come to make peace, although we took away their drinking water for a long time. But before all this, they were the ones who did us all the harm they could, killing the Indians we brought to our aid and relief, and wounding the Spaniards who tried to recruit Indians to serve His Majesty. Let the witnesses tell what they know about this case and what they saw happen. Likewise, ask the witnesses if they know that General Montejo saw that we had been fighting for a long time against said forces, protected on the rocks, and that we had pursued them many times, and that we had taken away the water they drank, and that we were always making war on them because they did not want to make peace and obey His Majesty as they were obliged to do, and that the Spaniards who were over said forces were in great need of food because in reality there was none, nor was there any way to obtain it, since the said Indians had it within their strength, and among the needs was not having shoes, nor weapons, nor where we could acquire them, and knowing that an Indian captain of said forces called, El Lempira, encouraged them and said that they should not make peace, but that they should kill us. He ordered one day that all the camps of the Spaniards who were over said forces, which were 3 in number, should become 3 and 1, so that together we could at night to the said camp called Ciguatepeque, where we had left, and that we should leave the said forces as they were. And if it is true that as soon as I demanded it, he had all the Spaniards gathered at the camp of the said captain for this purpose. It had been said and done. If it is true that the said captain called Lempira then left the said forces with many men of war and made us retreat in battle. You see, he made them retreat, in which he burned all the houses of the camp. Then he burned all the camp, right, of the Spaniards. Listen, and took from the graves the bodies of the said Francisco de Meza and Gasparin, whom this said captain had killed, and had the bodies dragged with their shrouds through the camp, and then had them hanged from some pine trees. You see what the Indians did to the dead bodies they already had killed? They dragged them and then they hanged them. They disrespected the Spaniards. This is why they didn't write this. This is why they didn't want the general public to know this story, because it's humiliating. You guys see? You guys hearing, right? This was found in the 1980s. All of which he did, seeing that we could not hinder him due to the great number of men of war that he had in the said forces. Tell us what you know, and if it is true that all this happened, as it is said and declared, etc., let the witnesses also say if they know that the said Rodrigo Ruiz saw what was being done and knew what the said General Montejo had ordered to do, and knew that all the Spaniards were in great danger, and that it was public and notorious that all the natives of the town of the said province were coming to wage war on us, some in one direction and others in another, and that it could not be less than leaving the camp to return to the sea of Siguatepeque, as he had ordered. They were to kill us or take some Spaniard alive, because many of them were wounded, and others so ill that they could not fight, which if they did was in great service to God, our Lord and His Majesty, and that they were suffering great dishonor from the Spanish people, and that all this was caused by the captain of the said forces called Lempira, because he ordered and commanded that it be done thus in battle. I, the said Rodrigo Ruiz, being zealous in the service of His Majesty, putting my person in great danger to avoid as much evil as was expected, tried to enter it, and entered the said squadron of enemies with my sword and shield, and went to the part and place where the said captain called Lempira was fighting and encouraging his people, telling them to kill us, who was wearing the weapons of the Spaniards. He even had their clothes on. He even had their gear on. That's what they're saying. This is one of the things about him. You know, he believed he can dodge the bullets if he wore their clothes, which was probably smart of him, because he noticed they probably had protective vests and metal and stuff like that on, right? Who had died in fighting with him. I killed him. This is what he's saying, right? This is Rodrigo. This is the guy who supposedly actually killed him. So he was in battle with him. It wasn't just an ambush. So he was wearing the Spanish clothes, and he who had died in fighting with him, right? He had died fighting with Rodrigo. I killed him and cut off his head. Listen to what he did, which I held and took out among the said squadron to give it to General Montejo. In that action, I received many wounds, both in the head and in the face, with all of which I took the head in my hands and never left it, although I was fighting and wounded by dangerous wounds from which I was close to death, and I gave the head to General Montejo in his hands. Let the witnesses say what they know and saw for the oath they have made, and if this really happened, let the witnesses also say whether they know that by killing Rodrigo Ruiz, the aforementioned captain called Lempira, I thereby rendered a very notable service to our Lord and to His Majesty for many reasons. So by him killing, sorry, this is not even translated that good, but by him killing Lempira, you know, he did a great service to Spain. One for being a traitor to His Majesty as he was, the other because it was the main part, so that those who were in said forces would not come to make peace because he hindered them, and they did not do more than what he ordered and said. And the other because he was the one who killed the said Francisco de Mesa and Gasparin, and made many others who were killed. And the other because he was the one who brought all the towns and natives of said province in turmoil and revolt. And the other because as soon as the people of the squadron saw that in the battle I killed him and cut off his head, they immediately retreated and gathered together the said forces, and in 4 days we won the said forces and rocks without danger to anyone, and all those who were inside left them, and went to settle in the towns and made peace and obedience to His Majesty, as all others do in said province were obliged to do as soon as they learned of the death of the said captain called Empira, who were also rebels and made strong in other forces, and thus it was populated then, the city that they now call Gracias a Dios, Gracias Lempira. Let the witnesses say that they know, and it is true, that I have served in the said war with my person, weapons, horse, and at my own expense for the entire time that the war lasted, a mission for which I have never been given any reward for it. You see that he did all that? He killed the top guy, the guy who was organizing, the most important person to go after, the guy who basically was protecting the whole of Honduras from being enslaved, all right? And he didn't get nothing for it. You see how they just used him. At the request of Rodrigo Ruiz, a resident and married in this city of Mexico, information was received in this royal audience to inform your majesty of the long time he has been in these parts and how he served in the pacification of the provinces of Guatemala, Honduras, and the city of Gracias a Dios, and other parts of that government where he did very good services, and he requests that in the accordance with his services he be given a pension with which he can support himself, since he did things worthy of remuneration in consideration of this, and that he is married, that he has lived in this city for more than 10 years, and that he suffers need. He hopes that through this legal document called proof of merits, which he now presents, your majesty will value his services and approve what he requested, all right? So you see, this guy is literally, he raised the case. He's like, hey, can I get a pension? Can I get some kind of recompension for what I did? You guys got to honor me. He's living poor, guys, at this time. Literally, they didn't care. That's how they treated him. For all he did for Spain, he was living as a poor person. That's the only reason we know of the true story, because he had to create a court claim. All right. It says 12 years later, the Viceroy of New Spain, Mexico, after studying the document and considering that Rodrigo Ruiz never had Indians in distribution in Honduras or Guatemala, and that he lives in Mexico, meaning he didn't have slaves. When they say he didn't have Indians in distribution, meaning he didn't own slaves, all right, in Honduras or Guatemala, and that he lives in Mexico with a populated house, wife, and children without any income and therefore very poor, recommended to the Council of the Indias that he be given a pension of 500 pesos as a reward for his services, as he is nobleman originally from the town of Escalona, where his parents and grandparents are from. Two witnesses say they knew Rodrigo Ruiz and his family in Escalona, proving his nobility for at least 3 generations. All right. So that's basically this document. Again, I hear that I translated. And again, guys, these are the two accounts that exist of Lempira, the great warrior chieftain, the guy who was not going to give up his land, his customs, his people's history, right? He didn't want to be enslaved. He didn't want to serve the Catholics. Why? Why wasn't there more Lempiras, guys? This is why I did this episode. And I think this is a very big candidate for this series, Unsung Heroes of America. A lot of us never heard of Lempira, never knew of Lempira. They don't teach about Lempira because Lempira is the symbol of freedom, of standing up for your rights, standing up for your people, for your culture. Like literally, he stood up for his people. He told them, don't ever give up. Don't ever make peace with them. Fight to the end. All right. Warrior, warrior. This was an honor, to Lempira. So he's not forgotten. And now he's remembered again. Honor to Lempira. I just want to say, guys, remember, just like the other unsung heroes that we've done, Galvarino and Cacique Hatue, the chief Hatue from Cuba and Haiti. And then the Black Panther, all these Jaguar warriors that were fighting the Orient of T'Challa. Like, this fits well in this series. We're talking about a freedom fighter, an unsung hero that nobody knows of, colonial America or just in general of America. We got to know about this. And I hope you guys understand the struggle people really went to. Like, he was literally trying to avoid his people being enslaved. A lot of these people probably ended up being enslaved, being sent to other parts of the Americas, even Africa or Europe, and eventually reclassified, called Negroes, Negroes of the land, Negroes of the land, all right? Well, that's the end of this presentation, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story of Lempira. I hope we remember him and honor him. If you want to dig up some more on him, you go feel free to. You'll see that these are the two main sources for his story. It's not a lot, but it's impactful when it comes to Honduras. You guys didn't know the Honduran money is called Lempira after Chief Lempira. The Honduran Lempira, all right, was named. So it says the Lempira, right, is the currency of Honduras. The Lempira was named after the 16th century cacique Lempira, a ruler of the indigenous Lenca people, who is renowned in Honduran folklore for leading the local native resistance against the Spanish conquistador forces. He is a national hero and is honored on both the 1 Lempira note and the 20 and 50-cent coins. All right. Lempira is important in Honduras, guys. In Honduras. Lempira, Lenca. Lenca is a Maya people, Maya warrior chieftain. Chieftain warrior gathered up to over 30,000 soldiers from 200 towns. All right. Again, this is in honor of the unsung hero of America, Lempira. You are not forgotten. Thank you for trying, and your spirit lives on in many of us. All right. And many of us believe that. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.